Okay, I'm honored to be here, everybody. And thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate being part of this conference. I just want to thank you for the great introduction as well. First of all, welcome to all the attendees out here, and thank you for your time. I'm going to share my screen in a minute with you, just to sort of go through a couple of ideas that came to me as I began reflecting on where the state of technology is now versus where we started this journey with the web about 25 years ago. And some of you in the audience maybe have been around since then as well. So maybe you can reflect on this memory lane trip with me. But there's lessons that apply from the history of the web to today's world. And I think a lot of companies could benefit from that insight. And also looking forward to 2025, we can see where I have a couple ideas I want to share with you all and see what you think. But let me share my screen with you. Give me 1 second here to do so. Let's see here. So basically what I'm trying to get to is in 1995, when I began the journey as an analyst in the internet, in those days, there was an online world that consisted of, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was an online world, yes, that consisted of AOL, CompuServe, and Prodigy in the US. And basically, for those who know technology, they were closed online services. And there's millions of people signing up using those technologies. And about the same time, what happened was a bunch of college students came along named from the University of Champaign, Illinois, led by Mark Andreessen and Eric Bina. And they came out with what was known as NCSA Mosaic web browser. Now, given that all these online services existed, the web browser seemed like a long shot, like who would want to browse the web because there's really nothing on the web. However, what I saw as an analyst in those days was an open system, an open platform. And I think the correlation today with today's decentralized applications in DeFi world of blockchain, I think we're seeing a very similar idea where the technology wants to be opened up to more and more users, more and more developers, more and more applicants to engage with it. And there's pushback from the existing players in every field that we're into, every industry. I think some of you developers have seen that if you're out there developing applications and things in this world. And the point is that all three of them try to control the protocols because we're now in the protocol layer phase of this whole thing. It began 5 or 6 years ago for most of us in terms of trying to build applications on top of these different protocols like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, even Solana and others. And we're just now starting to see applications that make sense with that. It's taken 5 or 6 years to do so. It's still very, very early in this phase. I think there's this protocol war going on where developers such as myself and others are trying to figure out, which is the right blockchain to build on. And I think by default, Ethereum has been an early leader in that area. But I want to remind some of you in the audience that in 1995-96, Mosaic became a company called Netscape Communications. It sort of put a professional face on. There we go. There's the slides. It put a professional face on the web itself. Instead of a group of college kids with a project, which is what Mosaic was, it now became something that was more professional. And they hired a bunch of suits and ties and guys that were. There we go. That's the endless presentation. We have a bunch of guys that were, dressed up properly to impress Wall Street. But at the same time, they began building a business called Netscape Communications. And I was at Netscape Developers Conference in 1995 in San Jose, California. And I remember it was San Jose, maybe it was Silicon Valley somewhere else. But it was like a zoo. It was a party, and everybody there was celebrating Netscape as this winner. Yeah, I'm going to go off my thing and turn off the. There you go. Great. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Thank you for doing that.
Just let me know when you
celebrating Netscape as the early winner in this whole industry. It was just so early with this. It didn't seem to make any sense. But at the time, Microsoft and Novell and others were caught with their flat-footed. And Netscape took the early lead. In fact, Netscape was the way everybody got on the web. I mean, if you were getting on the web in those days, pretty much 99% of them were coming on via the web. And for the longest time, they held the real estate, the whole front end of the entire web. So the whole GUI was the navigator you can see here on the screen. My point is this: it's a war, not a battle. I think Netscape and others started declaring victories as if the war was over. And when shortly thereafter, we saw that Microsoft and especially Microsoft came after them with the Internet Explorer. Yeah, you can. The next slide's fine. You can go to the next one, please. We go one more here. Let's see what we got. If we can hit the next one after that, that'd be nice. There we go. So basically, in a nutshell, I'm gonna give you a encapsulated version of this. The last 17 or so years, up to 2017, the web basically swallowed real estate, the front end of it. If we look at the listings and the marketing, the email of it, and some of the back end. But for the most part, the web itself swallowed the front end that has the pretty face of real estate. And we see that with companies like Zillow and others, even some of the traditional incumbents, realtors out there like Century 21. They began using the web as an extension of their back end. But certainly the back end, for the most part, was untouched. And if we hit the next slide, I'll show you what's happening in between 17 and now. I think blockchain emerged, Ethereum started hitting, and a lot of developers got excited about it, building applications. Some of the companies launched tokens out there. I mean, I'm not going to name a bunch of names, but you know who they are. Some of them were nothing more than white paper. Some of them were more involved than white paper. It's still very early to see who's what and what's who. And a very similar thing happened, in the early days of the web. A lot of companies throwing things against the wall to see what would stick. However, there has been this blockchain and crypto nibbling away at the real estate industry, the back end, because the back end is really what they're holding on to. The traditional incumbents, such as Sotheby's and Century 21 and others around the world, EXP, they're holding on to that back end. What is the back end? The back end is the transaction. The back end is the title, the escrow, and other things. And you can see on the left of this on the slide here, some of the companies that are attacking the blockchain, and who knows who's going to win. It's very, very early. But I think everybody's getting into it. A lot of them are coming out at it with the fractional ownership, which I think is one of the easier low-hanging fruits to go after. The actual end-to-end real estate transaction is a much more complex one, I think, as some of these players may have discovered, like Proppy. There's so many regulations in different countries that it's very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all solution internationally. If we hit the next slide. So, as a lot of you know, the blockchain protocols have emerged. Nobody wants to be building protocols these days. We're 5 or 6 years, 7 years into this stuff. Some of these are maybe longer if you look at Bitcoin. And these are not the days of protocols, although there could be one or two emerging, I believe, that specifically address just real estate. I'm not sure that all of these address it properly. I think smart contracts are one aspect of it. I think there's other aspects that haven't been addressed within any one of these protocols or platforms. And I think that's probably where an opportunity for a larger player to come in with a real estate specific protocol that has to emerge. Early on, it looks like Ethereum will be the one that takes over a lot of this stuff if it can adapt and grow quickly enough. I think all of us have been using some of these platforms and we discovered their shortfalls. Especially with the big whale in the group there, Ethereum. I think the transaction fees, the gas fees have been so high lately that they've hit a couple of things. They've hit scalability issues. And because of scalability issues, they've hit usability issues. And because of that, it's affordability. And so that limits possibility. Of course, security is in there. And that's key for all these things. You see how these interrelated things happen together: scalability, usability, affordability, and possibility. Because right now, I think developers are thinking about Solana a lot because the possibilities there seem to be more open and cheaper than the gas fees on Ethereum. Just to give you a personal example, I went and did a test on Ethereum's network to sell $91 of Tether, and the gas fees were over like $600. So that just gives you an idea what's happened with Ethereum and where they need to go to Ethereum 2.0, which I think will solve a lot of problems. But in the interim, as developers and those looking at this field as investors, we're wondering, which platform is going to emerge long term. I do believe there's a couple here, maybe all three of these will be very usable in across real estate. And I think we're going to have some redundancy in blockchain. I think we're finding out that dependability on one platform or one blockchain itself is probably too limiting. And I think we need redundancy. Like we need to be able to switch from Ethereum to Solana to Cardano, depending upon the transaction fees and the speed of the transaction. So I think that's probably coming, is this sort of hybrid world where we're not so dependent on one platform. And next slide. So here's the current state. There's a lot of different puzzle pieces and they're not put together. Especially with real estate, there's so many various moving parts to it. Title escrow and tax liens and property tax and insurance and mortgages and lending. And of course, the business model itself is very old-fashioned with brokering and agent model there. I think that's going to change, and that the blockchain itself is going to help institute that change. MLS, if you're not familiar, I'm sure most of you are, but in the United States, there's a multiple listing service, and there's several hundred of these across the country. It's very confusing to be able to tap into one versus the other. Companies like Zillow, I think, are attacking the front end, but again, the back end is largely untouched. And that's what we're talking about today, I think, is this back end, because the back end, I think, is where most of the value is coming from. When we change the back end, the transactions, the business model, and all of these elements, escrow, title, insurance, etc., then I believe that the industry will truly be brought up to speed in terms of today's technology. So the session topic today was 2025, and how does it look? And we've all jumped into the NFT marketplaces. We've seen OpenSea and others, and begin to wonder what's going on with people paying several $100,000 for a cartoon or something. And while that seems like a joke, or maybe seems like mystifying to a lot of us, there's something going on with NFTs, obviously. For the purposes of this industry, I think I would call it something more like NFA, a non-fungible asset. I think token is one way to express that asset, but I think there's going to be other ways to express non-fungibleness in this industry, not just tokens. So I'm using the term NFA, non-fungible asset. I think we're going to start seeing a shift, as we've seen in banking with DeFi and lending. We're going to see that finally start creeping in to the real estate world with mortgages. Challenging traditional lenders and really opening up home ownership to a whole new group of people. You can do risk files with DeFi that you cannot do as easily with something like Experian and TransUnion in the US, where they basically have a lock on your FICO score. And I think that's going to change in the next few years. And what we're doing with my company is we're really looking at how do you verify all these different aspects of real estate. There's a lot of different moving parts, like I showed you in the puzzle piece slide. And you have to verify every step of the transaction, ownership and title, insurance, etc. There's lots of verification. And blockchain, as you know, is the perfect way to do so. I think as we move into 2025, we're going to start seeing new ways of doing business, new technologies emerging, new ways of owning real estate, buying and selling, where there's just fractional ownership and living in a situation, leasing to own, renting to own, RTO, equity staking, looking at more like real estate as even buildings and commercial properties, seeing them more as an investment fund, where you're owning a building somewhere in New York City or Mumbai or London or Frankfurt, Germany, or Australia, doesn't matter. But you're owning a portfolio of properties, fractional ownership, just as you would own a piece of Bitcoin or a piece of Ethereum or Cardano. So I think that's coming. We're turning these real world assets into what I said, non-fungible pieces we can plug in and do things with. Back in '95, there was a handful of companies that existed, and we all thought AOL would be a winner. They tried to buy Time Warner and others, and of course today they're nowhere in sight. Netscape was the dominant leader, and everybody thought they were going to win the server war and the front end war with the browser. Here we are all these years later, and they don't exist. I mean, Mozilla is the legacy from Netscape. That's what exists today, and it's free. So my point is this: we're going to be entering into a phase next 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years where new names, new companies will be the dominant emerging forces in real estate. I just think a lot of them have not been launched yet. I think we're still early, and these first few sort of debuts on the stage that are trying things with blockchain and crypto. I think they're testing the waters, but I do believe it's not a first mover advantage necessarily. I think it's going to be more of a best mover advantage. Like who's looking at the technology and who's in this as a marathon and not a sprint. There's a lot of sprinters in every technology industry, a lot of sprinters where they want to build a company and sell it quickly. And there's others who realize it's a marathon. And if you look in technology, you can see that all around the world in every country. There's Amazon in the U.S. that was more of a marathon runner. Jeff Bezos saw from the beginning who's building something that was going to change retail across the board, and he just didn't want to sell out. Google tried to sell early on to Yahoo. Yahoo said no, but then Google ended up building this global force. Alibaba in China, we've seen example after example of people trying to build something in a marathon situation, long-term value. So we're going to see new names and new companies. If you're in this field just starting, I think that should be encouraging to you, that there's opportunity. It hasn't been figured out. The puzzle pieces have not been put together like I show on the whale here. It's going to be more complex than one winner. There'll be several winners across every different aspect of this industry. And it's going to be very exciting. I would call it, in some ways, democratizing of technology, which I think is what blockchain and crypto have been promising for so long. But anyway, I just want to encourage you to keep on plugging in and keep on trying things and building things, because there's a lot of excitement ahead. And this is just what we're building here. I wanted to give you an idea. It's a company called Homer. We're trying to put together the best practices across technology and really incorporate blockchain and tokenization and more in a very practical manner to fit all these pieces together. And we've been building it for about more than 18 months now. And just now opening up to a new round of funding. And our advisors include some of the executives who helped launch Ethereum and build PayPal. And anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing some of your projects out there. Contact me for the slides if you need to. Thank you.